Thus, land, labor, physical capital, and human capital are the four requirements or factors of a production activity. As is the case in most Indian villages, the main production activity in Palampur is farming. Around 75% of the working population in Palampur is engaged in farming. These include farmers and farm laborers. The welfare of the farming community is directly dependent on farm production. The more the production, the happier the farmers and farm laborers. So, how do we increase farm production? Well, there are two ways of doing it. One way to increase farm production is to increase the land area under cultivation. The other way to increase farm production is to adopt methods that allow you to grow more crops on the same land. Let us explore both these possibilities. Let us start with the possibility of increasing the land resource for cultivation. Land is a limited resource. We require land not just to grow crops, but to build houses, industries, public spaces, schools and hospitals, etc. Thus, it is difficult to increase the land area under cultivation. The only way to increase land under cultivation is to convert wastelands into cultivable land. However, wasteland is also limited, so this method can only increase the farmland marginally. What is true for Palampur is largely true for the whole of India. Observe in this graph how total land under cultivation in India increased only marginally between 1950 and 1970. Between 1970 and 2000, the land area under cultivation remained unchanged. Note that the land area in the table is mentioned in million hectares. Hectare is the standard unit of measuring land area and is equal to the area of a square having a side of 100 meters. Thus, 1 hectare is equal to 10,000 square meters. Since we cannot substantially increase the land area under cultivation, let us see how we can grow more crops on the same land to increase farm production. You can grow more crops on the same land in two ways. You can either adopt multiple cropping or use modern farming methods. Let us discuss both these ways in detail. Let us start with multiple cropping. Farmers in Palampur grow jawar and bajra during the monsoon or kharif season. These crops are used as cattle feed. After harvesting jawar and bajra, the farmers grow potato in their fields between October and December. After the potato harvest, the farmers sow wheat in the winter season, which they harvest before the monsoon the next year. A part of the land in Palampur is used to grow sugarcane that takes about a year to grow. Thus, in a period of 1 year, farmers in Palampur grow 3 crops on the same land. This method of growing 2 or more crops on the same land in a year is called multiple cropping. Farmers in Palampur can grow multiple crops in a year because they are not dependent on rains for irrigation. They have access to electric-powered tube wells to irrigate their fields. All villages in India are not as fortunate as Palampur. Less than 40% of the cultivated area in India is irrigated and is primarily in the northern and coastal plains. In regions like the Deccan Plateau, farmers are still largely dependent on rainfall for cultivation. Now let us learn about modern farming methods to increase farm production and how these methods are different from traditional methods of cultivation. Before we proceed, let us understand how farm production is measured. Farm production is measured as yield, which is the total quantity of crop produced on a piece of land in 1 year. Till the 1960s, crops were grown using traditional seeds that required less irrigation and grew well with natural manure made from cattle dung. Traditional farming is less expensive as the farmer does not have to buy too many things, but it produces a lower yield of crop. The Green Revolution in the 1960s introduced modern farming methods that used high-yielding varieties, or HYV, of seeds that required a lot of water and the application of chemical fertilizers and pesticides. Modern farming is more expensive as the farmer has to purchase HYV seeds, fertilizers and pesticides, and also has to pay for electricity and for the installation of tube wells for irrigation. However, the crop yield is very high as compared to traditional farming. With increasing yield, big farmers invested in farm machinery like tractors and harvesters. These machines speeded up the work, but increased the farmer's expenditure on fuel and maintenance. The high-yield seeds used in modern farming produce more grain on each plant as compared to traditional seeds. This is how farmers get a higher yield through modern farming. Farmers in Punjab, Haryana and western Uttar Pradesh were the first to adopt modern farming methods in India, and their yield got more than doubled. The Green Revolution in India was more successful for some crops than the others. This chart clearly shows that while wheat production in India has increased manifold, the production of pulses has not changed much. Of late, people have started associating several adverse environmental and economic effects with modern farming methods. Let us take a look at them. Prolonged use of large quantities of chemical fertilizers and pesticides kills useful bacteria in the soil, leading to soil degradation and a decrease in the natural fertility of soil. Chemical fertilizers and pesticides percolate through the ground to pollute the precious groundwater resources. Excessive use of groundwater for irrigation through tube wells has reduced the water table in many areas. With decreasing soil fertility, farmers are forced to use more and more fertilizers to maintain their production levels. This is increasing the cost of production for farmers and decreasing their income. Thus, we need to adopt modern farming methods with care for sustainable farm production. We have discussed multiple cropping and modern farming as two ways to increase farm production. However,